folks, I'm Pamela Young. This is Thrive 2030, brought to you by Growth Curve. And today I have David Whitehead, who is the founder and chairman of Mavin Group in Hanoi, Vietnam. Hello, David. How are you today?
Hello, Pamela. I'm very well, thank you. Very pleased to be talking to you.
Oh, well, thanks so much for joining us. It's really great to have an opportunity to talk to you. You're in the agribusiness. You've got a farm-to-table, quite an extensive enterprise, which I'd like to hear about today. But before I do that, I'd just like to share with folks that you have arrived in Vietnam from Australia, where you started your education as a ministerial advisor in the Transport and Defence Department and Comcare as a state manager. And then you switched from there to the education sector, where you were principal advisor to the Vice Chancellor at RMIT, similar role at Monash University and the Box Hill Institute of Technology. So it's quite an interesting background, and I would just like to give you a moment to sort of share with us how did you switch from that to Vietnam?
Okay, yeah, look, it's a good question. And, I often ask myself the same thing, how did I come to be here where I am now?
Yeah.
And look, I moved from education in Australia to really assuming I'd be working in education in Vietnam, because I had a partner who was also interested, a business partner, interested in working in schools and education, particularly in regard to training for companies to improve their processes and the way they manage and their strategic planning. I was more interested in working with companies.
Yes. All right.
And about that time, I ran into a couple of young fellows who were quite innovative and looking to set up an agribusiness. So that's when I started with what was then Ostfeed Vietnam.
Okay.
And that was a small feed miller based in the north of Vietnam. We struggled to get funding from banks and other things, but we started off.
So what I'd like to do is join you in lovely Hanoi before we get underway.
Please do.
Because I like to come to your city, so I've got the feeling, and people watching sort of get a sense of where you are.
Right.
Lovely evening view, and I'd just like to hear a little bit about the story. I know that you were very technology oriented at the start of your journey, but I also know, which you've outlined to me, is that you started a 5-year digital transformation in 2019, and you're halfway through that now. So for folks listening, what I'd like to get from you today, if you could highlight for us the preparation that technology that you installed very early on, how has that helped you through the last 18 months of quite challenging time?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about our business, because, I'm very proud of what we've achieved in a relatively short period of time.
Sure.
2004, as I say, we established the company. We have now about 2,500 staff. We have a corporate office in Hanoi. We have 5 feed mills, a food factory, 2 veterinary pharmacy laboratories, 20 warehouses, 1,000 distributors, and hundreds of pig, poultry and fish farms nationwide. So we have grown from, as I said, a very small feed miller to a multifaceted, vertically integrated agribusiness, one of the top 10 in Vietnam. We have overseas representative offices in Cambodia and Laos. And yes, we have applied automated systems and automated control systems. But when we talk about Thrive 2030, by 2030, Vietnam will strive to be among the top 40 countries in the world in the Global Innovation Index rankings, aiming for everyone to have broadband access at low cost, digital economy to account for more than 30% of GDP, and labour productivity to increase by about 8% a year. So these are great goals, but not without difficulty. So, we are involved in that environment, and we apply advanced technology to all of our farms with automatic feeding, cooling systems, computerised operations. We're a pioneer in aquaculture, applying the most advanced Norwegian round cage technology. We have a state-of-the-art food processing plant with all production facilities imported from Germany. So we have spent a lot of time and effort and money in making sure that we have been ready for digital transformation. From a small feed mill, we just tended to grow exponentially, and we were chasing, if you like, where we were with technology. So we needed to catch up.
Yes.
We wanted to learn more about our company and how it was operating.
Okay.
What processes were working well, what could be improved, things like that.
Yeah. When you say you grew exponentially, you were feeding the local market, or was this also the export market?
No, this our growth came from the domestic market.
Okay.
We started at a time when there was a need for another agribusiness company in Vietnam. Our competitors are quite large operators from Thailand, the US, and other places, China, for example. And we, although we're an Australian invested enterprise, we are a homegrown business.
Yeah. You're an essential business, obviously, in the food sector, so you were able to continue to operate during that 4-month lockdown earlier this year. But I'm just wondering, what were the challenges for you during that 4-month lockdown, and did your technology assist you to keep going because you had a high level of automation? Yes,
well, it's interesting. I'm often asked that question, what were the problems for you during the lockdown period? And my reply is usually, look, it was hardly noticeable, I must say, because as an essential business, for example, me, I came to the office every day. We have staff in the office. They're all working. Our feed mills all worked. People in our feed mills actually stayed and lived on site. So we didn't have people coming in and out. So our access was restricted, but it meant our feed mills could still operate because most people are locally employed, and we often employ families. So a husband and wife would be employed together. So they would stay in the feed mill for a long period of time. We were able to provide food that we brought in. There was showering and sleeping facilities there. So, we were able to continue and just keep going, which was great.
Yeah.
Look, the biggest challenge for us in the last few years has been African swine fever, really. That was more of a challenge than COVID has been. And our response to that was very difficult, and it's not just a Vietnamese problem, it was a worldwide problem that we deal with, just like COVID, and we had to manage processes around that, which were more challenging, really, than dealing with the situation of the pandemic.
Okay. So the technologies that you have put in place, what are the smartest of those? You're using AI, robotics?
Sure. Look, there's a range of things. Firstly, in our production facilities, in our feed mills and our veterinary pharmacy labs and our food processing plant, we have information control systems. We have clean rooms, for example. We have a range of different monitoring systems and sensors that mean that the product that comes out of those facilities is absolutely guaranteed to be clean, hygienic, well prepared, well packaged, and ready to go to market. In our feed mills, we use robotic systems and extensive control systems to manage the whole process, from input of ingredients right through to packaged product going onto a truck. So it's all about really having systems that control and inform, so we know exactly what's happening at any time.
So you're halfway through your 5-year digitization program. Many people did have some digital transformation underway, but a lot of people have told me that they did 5 years of work in 5 months. They really escalated things and ramped up the effort rather quickly. And I'm sort of have been wondering whether that might increase our concerns for data protection, cybersecurity, the sort of things where we need to make sure that we put controls around things. As you go forward, you've got another couple of years of digital transformation to complete. What are you hoping that will achieve for your business? And what pace will you be? Will you be accelerating the pace or just carrying on at the same pace?
Look, we were very conscious that we didn't need, or we didn't want to move too quickly, because what's happened with our business, as I said before, we've had very quick growth that we've needed to manage, and we wanted a system that would allow us to do that, so we could take a breath and look at where we are and to see what planning we needed to put in place to allow us to move forward strategically. So our 4 objectives were productivity and efficiency improvement, across the board, business planning improvement, and office digitalisation. So, and all of those things together were really where we wanted to move to.
Yeah.
Now we have access to accurate real-time data. We can identify potential areas of improvement. We can make quick decisions now. We can quickly respond to change.
Yeah.
And we strengthen our connection between people and between people and processes, which is even more important.
So, David, do you mind if we just move now to the topic of, the environment and sustainability? You're in the agribusiness. After, many years in service industries in Australia, you come to Vietnam in 2004 and you enter the agribusiness, and you've had 15 or more years there, 18 years. Can you highlight for me what some of the major environmental changes that you have seen in that time? Because you're obviously much more attuned to it once you enter the agribusiness than you are in education in Australia. And of those major changes, which ones have impacted your current business?
What used to be the case is there'd be smallholders who do all the farming in Vietnam, communities or family businesses. They're small and they're operating to processes and systems that were handed down from their grandparents, their parents, their uncles, their aunts. And, that's been okay for them. But what it's done over time has not taken account of things like pollution, effects on the environment, overuse of pesticide, overuse of herbicide, too much feed, too much water, no concern about wastewater management, no concern about any waste management. So that was the case. But then, as the larger operators came into the agribusiness field, like us and others, we have to bring with us systems that control waste and actually take care of the environment. Because we operate to international standards and we have a responsibility as a large corporate citizen to behave that way. So what's happened is a lot of large operators have now become the leaders in the way we manage our resources, the way we respond to environmental challenges, and the way we limit our impact on local communities. So through all of that, we've been able to control our waste management, control our effect on the environment, control our effect on local communities. But certainly the Vietnamese government and the Vietnamese people generally are much more aware of environmental change and, climate change than they have been before. I mean, there's a lot of Vietnamese people now who study overseas, and then when they come back, they have knowledge and understanding of what's happening in the world. And they ask the question, why are we doing it this way here? Why can't we do that? Why don't we learn from what's going on elsewhere? So there's that influence as well.
Over the last 2 weeks, there have been 25,000 people in Glasgow for the COP26 summit. And I'm sure that you've been watching that closely because it's really important to you, as it is to me and others. What are the highlights of that summit for you? What do you think they have achieved, and have they gone far enough?
Look, the great thing about a summit like this is that the subject is out there. The issues are being discussed. And, it was only 5 or 6 years ago when climate change was being challenged as a real issue or not.
That's true.
And people say, no, it's just a cyclical thing. This just happens. It's normal. So at least we've now got the issue on the table, and people are starting to recognise that we as people on this planet are having a direct effect on climate.
Yes.
And that has now been recognised, and that's a great step forward in itself.
Yes.
But I think, look, when governments and advisors and lobbyists and others get together in these large conferences, most of the work is done behind closed doors or in small committees or breakout rooms. The stuff that we see that comes through the media is the stuff that we're meant to see. So it's all positive about, we're taking steps in climate change and we're moving forward and we've got zero carbon targets and, all these things. And that's all terrific. But, the real measure is what will happen in the next 5 or 10 years.
They did make a call, the organisers, I think the president of the COP26 wrote a document this week requesting the leaders to update their 2030 plans by the end of 2022,
yes.
Yes, so they've got 12 months to update their plans so that they can be very sure that they're going to meet those 2030 targets, because there is some doubt that they will. What do you think about that? Do you think that is going to put more pressure on?
Yeah, of course it puts more pressure on, but really, there's no penalty, really, is there? I mean, the pressure is good, and it's, the global community needs to respond. But each country and each nation, as we've seen in responses to COVID, react differently. And, people have to respond to what the populace is telling them to do. I mean, most of the countries that attended the Global Summit were, elected democracies. So, they have to listen to what the people say. There was a huge range of people who attended this summit. People who have major concerns in real time about climate change, like those from Africa, those from the Pacific and others, where they can see year to year that the climate is changing.
Yes.
Whereas others, people who sit in New York or London or Paris, they don't really see what's happening, but they understand the theory about what's going on. So it was a very interesting mix of people, which I found, refreshing. The problem with democracies is that you're likely to get another leader in a couple of years and another party in place, for example, in Australia and New Zealand. So, and they all have different views of the issues about climate change and the environment and all those other things. So it's let's hope that there will be a positive change that comes out of this. I see climate change, in effect, and I have done since I've been here, in the Mekong region of Vietnam. Because that's the food basket of Vietnam. And there are major issues about increased salinity in the river, for example, which affects the growth of all sorts of products. It affects how fish farming can operate, for example. Whether particular plants, salt-resistant plants have to be introduced, etc. And there are major issues about water levels, about the river itself, and the river is the life of the Mekong region, and it's a very, very important part of Vietnam.
Vietnam is a developing nation with huge growth over the last decade of 7 and 8%, and I understand this year you're still going to achieve close to 3.84% growth despite the challenges of COVID and the lockdown and everything else. So there's a lot going on there. But how does this question of shifting to alternative fuels, how does that get driven in Vietnam? What are the drivers? Who is in charge? What influences are there to achieve the goals for Vietnam to be carbon net zero by 2050?
Yeah, well, Vietnam has been a producer of coal for a long time, and there's quite a large coal industry and coal export industry here. There's a number of thermal power plants, for example. But, there's a very strong shift now to look at alternative energies, particularly solar power, wind power, and even some work on tidal power as well. So, and this is coming from mostly influence and pressure from outside of Vietnam. I mean, with globalization now, there's not much that you can do within a country that isn't seen or isn't available to be viewed by others. And, Vietnam just can't go on being a coal producer and a coal polluter. So it has to look very seriously about energies. And I've seen some figures recently about the plans for electric vehicles and the reduction in the use of carbon fuels generally. And it's amazing. It really, I don't think it's being taken that seriously here in Vietnam because there are so many other infrastructure issues to be dealt with here. But certainly the reduction in coal is one thing that's being looked at and being addressed. But I know people in the industry and they say, look, What they see is that there are thermal power plants that are continuing. Coal is required in a range of different industries and will be for the foreseeable future until there is enough funding available in order to supplement and replace those operations with alternative fuels. Mm-hmm. So it will be some time, but, the government recognises the need to push forward with alternative fuels for sure.
Yes. What other industries are impacted by the climate change in, obviously, agricultural, farming, fishing? Yeah. Do you see the impact of the environment on other industries in Vietnam?
Well, yeah, look, I see climate change affecting everything because it changes, the weather patterns are changing here. So it can affect tourism, for example. When people come, whether they want to be caught in the monsoon season has been changing. Mm-hmm. So it can affect tourism and travel. It affects all sorts of manufacturing. I mean, friends of mine have manufacturing plants out of Hanoi, mm-hmm. and they're affected by conditions that affect the logistics and supply chains. And climate change and weather patterns can have a direct effect on logistics. Logistics for us right now, not only for my company, but for any manufacturer or operator in Vietnam, is the major issue. Logistics is it's just affected by everything. It's been affected by COVID, for example, where we've had drivers who have to be regularly tested before they can take product from one part of the country to the other. Mm. We have restrictions on crossing borders. We have restrictions at ports. We have restrictions with clearance of customs, both out and in. So it's been a major issue for us. So logistics is always at the forefront for me.
Yes, that seems to be the case in most countries. And I'm wondering, if it's going to take us another 2, 3, 4, 5 years to get over the major challenges that the pandemic has introduced, and the logistics and the supply chain and shipping, maritime, I mean, roads, rail, everybody is still adjusting to the challenge, and there's a backlog which could take another 2 years to clear. Yes. So do you have advice for people in those industries from your experience with digitization, as to how they might move forward? Because some of those industries are not that well digitized. A lot of it is still quite manual, which is part of the problem, apart from COVID lockdowns and restrictions. Their ability to pivot and adapt quite quickly has been noted. Do you have thoughts about what might be helpful to the logistics industry to
look? The way to improve supply chain management is to shorten supply chains. Yes. In other words, bring the logistics, the links in the chain closer together, so that they are controlled. So the nodes in the supply chain are manageable. When we have long supply chains, the chain can break at many places along the way. Yes. But if you have shortened supply chains that are well managed, then you can actually have some control. And logistics is all about control of time, control of process, and control of movement. And it's just being able to manage that. And you can manage it much better if the supply chain is shortened. So that's what we've been looking at. And to also look at, working locally. When we're a domestic operator here, but we like to work now, we recognise that instead of having a feed mill in a place and then having customers, halfway around the country, it's better off to build another feed mill close to our customer source. Yes. So that we can have short supply chains. Yes. We can guarantee supply. Yes. And we become much more localised. So although logistics is a global issue, we've got to really operate locally. So having those short supply chains, distribution warehouses strategically located so we can connect quickly with our customers. That's the way to do it. And of course, with those things, you need more control systems, you need more technology, and you need more and closer management. So that's where digital transformation comes in.
I have heard from a number of people in the who are affected by supply chains, which are mainly manufacturers, farmers, growers, and so forth, and exporters and importers. That they are many of them are looking for local production because, imports and exports has been seriously challenged, so they've got to find local suppliers, which makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering, do you think in 3 to 5 years' time they'll forget about the pandemic and those challenges and go back to sourcing overseas because it's cheaper, faster, more economical?
Look, I think there's 3 issues that have come out of the pandemic, and they are adaptability, agility, and resilience. And those 3 things, for companies to survive and thrive over the next 10, 20 years, they have to have those 3 things and manage them well. Adaptability, you've got to adapt to change. I mean, this is never going to go back to what it was before. There's no question about that. We're not going to have the old way of doing things. The world has changed. And, we're not getting over the pandemic. We're just learning to live with it. So, we've got to have systems in place that allow us to do that. So and this is not going to be the only major change that happens in the 21st century. There will be others. So companies, businesses, governments realise they must be able to adapt to the change, to adapt, to accept it, to recognise it's going to happen, and then be agile enough to move quickly to look at the options that are available, and to be resilient, to bounce back from difficulty, bounce back from catastrophe. So if you're adaptable, you're agile, and you're resilient, you will survive.
Yes.
And there will be many companies who will stick to the old ways of doing things, thinking that things are going to go back to what they were, and they will fail. There's no doubt about that in my mind. So those 3 things are so important for moving forward, not only in agribusiness, but in a range of different sectors, to be agile, to be adaptable, and to be resilient.
Yes, and also to think innovation, because the rate of technology is changing at such a fast pace. And 5G is going to be followed by 6G, which is less than a decade away, isn't it? Yeah. So if we're still catching up with 5G while they are already designing 6G, and these are changing the nature of the way that both products are developed and services are delivered. So we do need to keep our innovation hub going and our investment in R&D, and just think about doing things differently in the future. So, being agile and resilient says that we're coping with the current state, but what we have to do is plan for further change and much more.
That's right. And that's where the adaptability comes in, to be adaptable, which means to be innovative and to accept that change is inevitable and that we're going to have to face it regularly, and then to have strategies to cope.
Yes. I'm just wondering, the pandemic on many companies had the risk radar. The pandemic said, it was there, but it was a low risk, might have had a high impact, but because it was low risk, not too much was taken care of. They didn't bother with some planning, didn't really expect it to happen, so not much investment in it. The climate change will be on the risk radar as well, and I'm wondering whether people are adjusting their rating from, it's not going to happen for another 30 years yet, because we didn't expect the pandemic to happen. So I'm wondering what you think. Will people change the way that they look at the climate change on the risk radar after the pandemic? Will they say to themselves, we weren't ready for that, we didn't expect it, and look what's happened? So will they take a different view of the climate change rating on their risk radar in the future? Will it escalate things?
Yeah, look, I think the way we people look at events and change that's happening in the world will be different. The pandemic has taught us many things. It's taught us that we weren't ready, that we didn't respond well enough, that we didn't respond quickly enough, that we responded individually as nations rather than globally to what was essentially an issue that affected everybody. This was an international problem, but then the responses were left to individual countries to develop. It was just... Anyway, look, the important thing is that we now recognise that, the world isn't what it used to be, that there is going to be change, it's inevitable, and we need to look at the important things. And the important things for me are climate change, pollution and waste management, how to move forward in an ever-changing environment, how to be adaptable, to use technology to assist us with our thinking, to be creative and to be innovative, and to always look further than what our lens gave us before. So try to anticipate what's going to happen, but if it doesn't, be adaptable to the change that comes. So, you know, all of those things mean that people have to, I mean, companies that were stable and reliant on regular income and had steady consumer demand, steady range of customers and others, that's all gone, really. That just doesn't happen anymore. That level of stability is disappeared. I mean, the old, you know, the bricks and mortar companies where people came into work at 9 o'clock, left at 5, there was a regular stream of revenue, etc. That's not going to happen anymore. People are going to be working from home more. There's going to be options about where they work, how they work. Things like this video conferencing, for example. This is the way of doing business now. I mean, we used to go, you know, put on our suits and go and sit in our meeting rooms and meet for, you know, 4 or 5 hours and then go back to our offices, and lost all of that time, generally for not much benefit. But now we can have quick video conferences, make fast decisions, pull people into the office, allocate tasks, be innovative, be adaptive, and we will be resilient.
Yes. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to ask you about is yourself, Mavin Group, is actively involved in a number of initiatives to support community projects and things like that. Can you just tell us about one or two of the most important ones that you've been participating in? Sure.
Look, yeah, we have been, because we recognise that as we grew, we were having an impact, intentional or otherwise, on our local communities. And the local communities in Vietnam are, you know, small communes of people. They often include ethnic groups, and, you know, they don't really understand what we're doing, why we're there. And often these people are in fairly difficult situations as far as poverty is concerned and education opportunities. So what we do is, anywhere we have a feed mill or, you know, a large operation, we work with the local government authority and we identify with them how we can provide some level of sustainable assistance to the local community, so that they recognise that we're not just a company that's come in there to take over their environment, but we're there to work with them and to actually provide some benefit.
Is this one of your projects?
Look, one of the examples is, oh, that's a nice photograph.
Is that one of your projects?
It is. That's our ducklings,
Yes. Yeah. What was going on there?
Well, these are, as you can see, these are ethnic peoples. And this was, we have a project with World Vision, which started off as a pig farming project where we provided piglets to a range of poor communes and households. We would provide them with technical support, feed, veterinary medicines, help them grow the pigs up to be commercial. And then when they sell them, they would generate revenue. And then they buy piglets from us at a reduced price and continue. And that was a very successful program until African swine fever came along, and we needed to be very careful about, you know, pig farming in small communities. So we changed it to what we now have is ducks. So we're in the duck business there, and you know, we have high quality ducklings, as you can see. We import the genetics. Ducklings. And we grow beautiful little yellow ducklings. Yes. And what we found is now that we have a sustainable duck farming under the same model. So World Vision and us work together. We identify communities in need. We provide them with the assistance, support, and the ducklings to grow. They take them to market, and then we repeat the process. So it's a sustainable operation for the people. It's a very good, a feel-good thing for us, but it also means we're actually giving back to the community, and we're working with an organisation like World Vision, who really recognises and understands our contribution. And it's the first time around the world that World Vision has actually worked like that with a company like us, to have a sustainable project with people like that.
Fantastic.
So it's
good
very
on
good
you.
for us. Yeah.
You're doing some really great work up there. I mean, your story to come from education and start a feed mill and end up with a multiple farming where you're farming ducklings, piglets and fish and processing food, and you have a veterinary business that helps to support all this. I mean, you've done a phenomenal job. So, you know, congratulations and thank you for sharing your story with us today and, you know, giving us a sense of how Vietnam industries are coping with some of these climate change challenges, because I know they're really, really big. Before I let you go, David, I have to ask you that last question, which is, you know, if you were chief executive of the world at some point in the future, which is a really big job, what would be priority and top of mind for you to try and address in the first 100 days? What would be the most important thing for you to get on with?
Well, yeah, look, it's got to be about the environment. It's got to be about 100 days. It's not a long time, actually, to achieve anything.
Just to get out on the table, not to achieve, just to put on the table.
No, to get on the table. Well, it's going to be the environment, putting systems in place and legislation in place that will control pollution, will encourage people to take care of what they have and to recognise that the world has been seriously damaged by people. And we need to understand that we have a responsibility. And what we're doing is affecting how we will be in the future. And that's going to affect my children, my children's children, etc. So my focus, if I was in charge of the world, would be about concentrating on the environment. Concentrate on the environment. Yeah. Everything you do must be about the effect you're having on your local environment, your regional environment, and the global environment. Yeah. So that would be the focus for me. Because, you know, I think if people do that, they take responsibility for what they're doing. Yeah. And we can provide support systems to help them do that. And then we all live in a better place. Yes. You know, everything becomes a better place. So environmental management, environmental and social responsibility, and, you know, dealing with things like climate change and other major catastrophes that are likely to come. They're the big issues for me, and that's what I'd be concentrating on. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that's a really great place to start. After all, this is our planet. We don't have another one to move to yet. And I know that there are some leaders in the world who are going exploring to find that next planet. And I know that, I think it was Prince Charles who said, why don't they just concentrate on fixing this one instead of looking for an alternative? When you think about the orangutans in Borneo, for example, I went to see them many years ago with my young son. We went all the way to the eastern side of Borneo to look at the you know, the orangutans in their, you know, what do you call it, habitats where they were trying to reestablish. Natural habitat, When you think about how we have damaged not just, you know, environments for species, but we're also doing it to the waters, the oceans, which are getting warmer, and, you know, coral beds are dying, but we're also affecting our own environment. There are many of our cities that are just covered in smog from our coal farms and our pollution. So it's all very well to be progressive, but we have to, you know, as you say, look after our environment because we have to live in it. Well,
it's an interesting issue because during the lockdown we had here in Hanoi, I mean, Hanoi is a generally highly polluted city, but during the lockdown, when people were not going to work, they were not traveling around, the pollution index in Hanoi was wonderful. I mean, clear blue skies, it was terrific. So you can really see the difference that can be made quite quickly if we reduce pollution from motor vehicles and factories, etc. I mean, there can be change very quickly. It can be. And it's just something that we should be concentrating on.
Yes. David, thank you so much for your time today. Really good to get to know your business, and thank you for your advice for all the people who are listening who are looking for ideas. David Whitehead from Hanoi in Vietnam. Have a good day. See you again.
Thank you, Pamela. You too.
You're welcome.